Hey everyone, Jason here from Off the Beaten Path, and we're continuing on our adventures with Dan from Out There with Dan. So we got into camp pretty late last night at Native Dog Flat, which you can see just here on the screen. So after coming through Omeo and Benambra, now we stopped at Omeo to refuel, and those lights on the dash did go out. So I'm thinking we're going to be okay today. But I was a little bit nervous, and we're going to be driving some pretty steep country today. So I decided that while the driving was good, I'd keep driving, and I was not going to turn this car off all day if I could avoid that. So yeah, we started off at Native Dog, headed northeast back down the Limestone Road to start the Limestone Creek Track. Now we did have a little bit of a faux pas there, which I'll cover off when we're driving, but lessons were learnt for all of us, mostly me. So yeah, started the Limestone Creek Track. Now the conditions were overcast and light rain, and this track is really steep in sections. As you can see noted here on the map, does have a warning sign at the start of the track saying double black diamond difficult. I think it's probably been graded since that was put in place. But yeah, Limestone Creek Track is a really nice track in this first section, takes you through the valley. There's a bit of a campsite down there, lots of spots. Does get very soft down there when it's been wet, so we didn't go too far off the track at this particular time. And once you pass the campground, it is seasonally closed because this latter section is really steep. So follow Limestone Creek Track up here. As you can see, very steep, tight switchback in sections. Little obstacle here close to the end, which you can drive around. It was very slippery, and we were glad we could drive around it. And then from there we headed on to McCarthy's Track. Headed sort of northwest, crossed over Davies Plain Track and the Misery Trail, and continued on the Buckwong Track to the Buckwong campground and looking for the Buckwong huts. And that is where our trip ends, or this video ends for today. So let's get into the trip, guys. Here we are at Native Dog Camp. This is where we found camp last night. Very grey. Sort of tried to rain through the night, nothing really very heavy. Making a coffee. It's about 7 o'clock. Yeah, getting ready for today. Those glitches with the page went away yesterday, so probably going to continue on. I think it's probably just a solenoid or something. So anyway, we'll just play it by ear. Cracking little camp spot here though. Nice little river. Right here. Pretty happy we managed to find this campsite last night on the way in the dark. There's not too many other people here. Some guys camping in a tent there, and some guys up the front near the road in, I think, a drifted dot. Anyway, coffee time. Coffee and breakfast time to start the day. And after a quick pack up, we're on the way. You can see there the link to the Buy Me a Coffee page for the Off the Beaten Path channel. You can log on there and support the channel if you so desire. You can purchase patches and stickers on that page as well. So yeah, we packed up and we're heading out to the main road, to Limestone Creek Road, to then head to Limestone Creek Track. Now, this is where there was a bit of a learning experience on this particular trip. So I was a little bit ahead of Dan. I was ready a little bit sooner than he was. So I went out to the front there and I waited. And on the way in, that guy that's hiking there, by the way, that you just saw, he's walking to Canberra, if you believe that. Pretty crazy. On the way in the night before, I pointed out to Dan, hey, there's the Limestone Creek Track. That's the track we're going to be driving tomorrow morning. Our camp is a few more Ks up here on the right. I wasn't really considering the fact that Dan had never been to this area before, and that he'd had a huge day with only 3 hours sleep sort of thing the night before. So what actually happened was, as soon as Dan got moving from the campsite, I was out the front and I headed off. And I don't think I actually said on the radio turning left, which as the trip leader I should be making sure that everybody, even if it's just one other person on the trip with me, probably even more important, knows which way we're turning. So what happened is Dan came out of the campground and turned right, because logically he thought we were progressing further in the direction that we'd been heading in. So we're both heading away from each other in opposite directions, talking on the radio, and I'm driving slow, wondering when he's going to catch up to me. And then next thing I know, we're out of radio contact. Now, we hadn't talked about a contingency plan, but fortunately we both automatically did the right thing, or the same thing, and we turned around and both headed back to the last point of contact, and we ended up meeting up back near the Native Dog campground. But it's one of those things that just shouldn't have happened. I should have been a lot clearer with my direction. I should have been more patient. It just shouldn't have happened. But fortunately, we both turned around. We both went back. And as they say, less speed, more haste, because if I hadn't been in such a rush to get on the tracks, we would have got on the tracks quicker. But yeah, one of those things, when you're traveling in a group, always make sure everybody knows where you're going, what the turns are, and even when it seems logical because you've been there before, make sure you wait and make sure you see people make the turns. So anyway, enough of that, guys. As you can see here, we're into the Limestone Creek Track. This is really scenic. You've got that initial run that you saw down Limestone Creek Track, and that's a lot of limestone. It's very steep. Camera probably didn't do it justice. You get down into the valley here, and the front end of Limestone Creek area is actually open 12 months of the year. The past this camping area in the valley here and on the river, it is seasonally closed because that's the very steep section of the track. You can see there one of the access parts off to one of the camping areas. There's a number of spots down here where you can camp, as you can see there, just driving around, a bit of a bog hole on the main track. It does get very soft down in here when there has been rain, and there had been a bit of rain as we came to, the few days before we came to this area. And there's a few side tracks here and there. You can see a long drop just in the distance there on the right, and some more campsites. So really cracking spot down in here to camp, but we camped up at Native Dog last night because we were arriving in the dark. Didn't want to try and drive down here and find a campsite when it's dark, because it's a confusing enough area to navigate in even during the day. And I also knew that we'd had rain, and these campsites down here can get a bit soft, and didn't really want to be trying to deal with that again in the dark. Native Dog's a bit higher and nice and firm next to the little stream there. Cracking spot to camp. We both really enjoyed that. So you can see there another side track down towards the stream, and other camping opportunities within Limestone Creek area. You can see the creek there sort of wending its way, and a few puddles on the track, and there's a little bit of water on the lens too, because there was some light rain. So here we are tackling Limestone Creek Track, which last time I drove it was probably 2019, and at the time I thought it was just insanely steep. I was solo, and here we are. It's probably 2019, 2020, somewhere in there. So yeah, three years, maybe 4 years ago. You can see we just passed the seasonal closure gate, so we're into that part of the track where it's heading towards the steeper section, and sure enough, straight away here we are into a very long, steady climb. A few little wombat holes here, but they're not fully sort of dug out yet. The surface is pretty good, and plenty of traction, but just a really long, steady climb. Going to work your whole drivetrain really, dragging your car up this. It just kind of keeps going and going. As you can see, the further up you get, the further it seems to go, and that's a common theme for the hills in this area. So it's certainly going to let you know if your car is prone to overheating or the cooling system is not working at 100%. It's going to let you know that in very short order. And yeah, we've sort of crested the top of this section. You can see up here just on the right there's a little bit of an informal camping area there on the right hand side, nice and level. Up here on the ridge, and then of course before not very long you're heading back down. So this Limestone Creek Track sort of makes a habit of that. It crisscrosses and parallels the Limestone Creek, and in doing so works its way around and over the hills and ridge lines that run alongside it. There's a couple of these little crossings here. In my experience, it's never been particularly deep. It's not a very large a very large stream, but certainly it is there. And yeah, just continuing on. This section of the track is in quite good condition. Traction's not really an issue at all, and you can see we're coming up to another crossing here. So as I was saying, there's more than a couple of those. Another little camp spot there on the right hand side, again right on the creek there, nice and level, cracking spot for a campsite. And we're definitely into the climbing section of the track here. The typical switchbacks that you see everywhere in the high country. This one tends to run up the hill more than across the hill. And as you can see, every time you sort of think, oh yeah, that's the run up and that's the end of the hill, it's not. You sort of crest this hump and then there's another climb straight after it to continue going. And unfortunately in the second part of this track there's usually some cracking views to be had. We didn't really get the benefit of those today on this particular trip. The weather being what it was, you can see there's a lot of cloud closed in, and there were the odd spits of rain here and there, so it wasn't something that we got to enjoy, but just means we'll have to come back another time. Notwithstanding, I think Dan quite enjoyed coming along on this particular track. And did I mention that it just kind of keeps climbing? Probably a time or two. And it is the kind of track that some of the sections have got a clay and other sections have got a limestone base. You certainly wouldn't want to tackle this in heavy rain when the track was quite wet. I think traction would be a whole different thing in those situations. These rockier sections like this would probably be okay, but other sections I think would be very, very slippery. And I suspect that's how and why the track got its rating. and I suspect that's why it's seasonally closed, because when there's been a bit of rain around, it's probably not very safe to drive at all. And that was certainly part of our concern. We were wondering how heavy was the rain going to get, and we certainly didn't want to be halfway along this track and have a huge rainstorm set in. And of course, once you've climbed up, you invariably come back down again. So you can see this is just the exact reverse of what we've just been driving up. It's step after step going down over those diversion humps that are designed to push the water off the track and minimise erosion on the track. Dan coming down in the grey dingo. And of course, that wasn't the last one. This section here, if I'm remembering correctly, is probably one of the steepest sections of the entire Limestone Creek Track. Could be a second one after this as well. And you can see this has definitely got a limestone sort of base to it, and sort of the beginnings of some ruts forming, indicating just how much people are working. You can see some wombat holes on this hump here in various locations. So coming the other way, people have definitely had to work pretty hard to get up and over these. Last time I did it, it was nice and bone dry. It was in summer, and I didn't really have too many traction issues coming up and over. But, you know, a little bit of water on here is all it would take, and that situation would be very different. Towards the end of the Limestone Creek Track, there's actually a little bit of an obstacle, and you'll see just how slippery the track is in certain conditions. So Dan coming down in the grey dingo on that same section of track, just to give you a little bit of sense of scale. You can see those humps are proper big humps as the cars come up and over them. And you can get a bit more of a sense with this long shot of just how big those ruts and wombat holes are on these climbs. He's doing a cracking job there, choosing a really nice line. Using his low range engine braking to control his speed on the descent. And I do think the Prados probably have a little bit more engine braking than the Pajeros, particularly the later model ones like mine. I do know that they changed the diff ratios for the NXs, or from about 2016 onwards. Better fuel economy on the highway apparently, but it did reduce how low the low range actually was. So again, another one of these proper steep descents. You know, when you're coming down a track and it's just disappearing out in front of you down the hill, you know it's proper steep. So yeah, definitely first gear low range, supported here with a little bit of manual braking. And once again here we've worked our way back down to the Limestone Creek, and we've got another little crossing here of the creek. It's probably the deepest and widest one so far. Keep an eye on the brakes on the front left, passenger side. I thought that was the one. I remember editing this, and good cloud of steam coming off the brakes, but obviously wasn't this crossing. Dan coming through on the grey dingo. Once again, cross the creek and then start the climb on the next hill with the invariable switchbacks. A little bit off camber this track. Not a lot of room on some of these sections for overtaking either, of course, but the corners are usually not too bad. Obviously somewhere here there's plenty of room there on that outside corner to have another vehicle pull over and facilitate passing and overtaking. Another long steady climb here. Overall the Limestone Creek Track is a good sort of 15 k's, and look, with a steady pace, if you're not stopping and filming like us, you can expect it to take an hour or even a little bit over an hour, depending on the pace that you're managing to hold. Some of these sections you're not even doing 15 kilometers an hour. And yeah, as you can see there on the screen, even bigger steep descent. I think this is the one I was thinking of earlier. You can see that track just disappearing down out of frame. You know, when you're looking down a track like that and you just see it continuing to go down, I don't know if you caught there either, just how big that wombat hole on top of that first hump there was. And that they can be quite an issue, you know, particularly if you're driving a vehicle that doesn't have traction control. You go up over those, those humps, you don't see the wombat hole. You drop a wheel in there, you suddenly have no braking on that wheel. The vehicle slides, builds up a bit of momentum, and before you know it, you can be moving a lot faster than you're intending. So whether you're climbing or descending on these sort of tracks, you really want to be paying attention to your line and try and keep your wheels on the ground if at all possible, or at least be prepared to deal with a bit of a loss of traction and some speed that you maybe weren't planning for originally. As I said, this one just keeps going. One of those descents that just keeps on giving. And even at this point, it's sort of not done with you. You can see we've got the corner there and the descent continues, but I did pull up so I could film Dan coming down that same section of track. Particularly with these external cameras, you get a sense of just how grey and overcast it was. And looking back up the track like this gives you also a good sense of just how steep the gradient is and how far down the track actually comes in this descent. Grey dingoes making its sure-footed way down this hill. A little bit of pace there over that hump, you can see. Not sure if he was intending to take it quite that fast. He may have been relying just on his engine braking and not getting the slowdown and speed he was hoping for. As I was saying, you can see this, we're around the corner at the bottom of that big descent and it just keeps going down. You can see how much the track on the side there on the edges, it's just dropping away almost vertically. And while you're not getting the full view, you can certainly see across to the next nearest mountains and get a bit of a sense of just how hilly this terrain that we're working in here actually is. can see the next section of the track down below us there to the right, so fair indication that one of the typical 180 switchbacks is coming up. And I did end up having to pull up on that corner because the GoPro ran out of battery, so that's why that corner wasn't actually filmed, because I had to pull up and change the battery. It stopped recording. Again, not quite your typical switchback, but just following the edge of the hill around, and it's quite a good size sort of stormwater gully cut through the track here, and it was much bigger than it looked, so definitely took that slow and steady. When you're driving something that's IFS and you don't have the flex that some vehicles would have, you definitely want to take your time. So a little crossing here over the stream. It's sort of an earth and rock bridge, and it's actually a lot narrower than it looks because the edges were sort of collapsing in somewhat. So yeah, not the same sort of thing exactly, but made me think of that Cape York Bridge.
Times like this, I'm glad I'm not driving a 300 or something wider.
So just waiting for Dan to come through now, the grey dingo. And as it says there on the screen, probably a little bit left of where is ideal, but no harm, no foul. And just progressing on, you can see there how wet this area is. So some areas have got springs that make the track a lot wetter than it otherwise would be. And yeah, this section was certainly pretty well weathered and chewed up. And we're just actually approaching that obstacle that I was mentioning. So you've got one line there on the right, on the rocks, and an alternate easier line on the left. So last time I drove this, I actually came down that right hand side. Given the conditions today, I wasn't sure about having a crack at it, but got out to have a look and just sort of see how slippery that rock surface was. It was pretty slippery, and you're about to see just how slippery it actually was. So I initially tried to crawl it, just use the low pressure and the weight of the vehicle. You can see there, doesn't really matter which way I'm trying there. As soon as I'm getting the tyres up on the rocks there, it's just sliding to the side and not really having a bar of it. So I tried to get one wheel up on the bank a little bit more onto some drier material, but you can see there the whole front end just slid straight across even after I'd stopped trying to accelerate. So I was trying to get one wheel up on that right bank there, so I pulled over to the left and was looking at trying to take that left hand line.
I think it's just too soft and slippery, mate.
And
yep.
Like, look at that. I did not expect that, and it's not like I was giving it heaps of gas. I think, yeah, it's too soft and slippery.
Too soft and slippery, so we're taking the beeline. We'll have to come and tackle this one next time.
So we've just decided that it's too soft and slippery even for Jason's adventurous slant. But yeah, we'll go the safe way and make sure we get home all right. Alrighty.
As you'll see in the later episode, that could be prophetic words from Dan right there. We did all get home safe. All the people got home safe. So, piloting the grey dingo around that obstacle nicely. And that particular little obstacle is very close to the northern end of the Limestone Creek Track. And the Limestone Creek Track joins onto McCarthy's Track at the end, and there's a T-junction here. Now if you turn right, it's about a 2 or 3k run down to the Poplars, which is a cracking little campsite right on the river. So we're just coming up on that T-junction now. So yeah, if you turn right there, it's about 2 or 3k's down to a cracking little campsite right on the river there. We had thought about going down there because Dan was sort of keen to check out maybe some campsites in this area, but we were a little bit conscious of time, and I think the guy who planned this trip tries to put too much into each of the days. So we decided to push on. Just off that track as well as a little climb up to the top of Round Mountain. It's only 970 metres above sea level, but it's a nice little drive up to a helipad on top of that mountain as well. So heading west now on McCarthy Track, and we're straight into a climb. You can see this track's got a real clay base to it. Definitely got some ruts starting to form. And I remember coming down McCarthy Track when I drove this 3-4 years ago, and it's in much the same condition now as it was then. But yeah, definitely got some ruts and the odd bog hole here and there starting to form. So it's about 11 or 12 k's along McCarthy's track, and you link up with the Davies Plain Hut Track, which we won't be taking today because this was prior to the current seasonal closures. So this footage was shot back in May, just before the seasonal closures, and at that time the middle section around the hut of Davies Plain Hut Track was still seasonally, well, not seasonally, it was closed. So hopefully after the seasonal closures this year, the full length of Davies Plain Hut Track will be open again. It'd be cool to be able to drive that again. It's not a particularly difficult track, or at least it wasn't last time I drove it. So yeah, that'd be really cool. So after a bit of a couple of climbs there on McCarthy's Track, we're coming across the ridge. You can see that there's some gum trees there still recovering from bushfires from a few years ago, and yeah, a little bit of a hill here, but not too much going on. Generally this track is pretty good condition all the way through. Lots of bush and stuff to keep an eye on, so a little bit of a different scenery to Limestone Creek. And as we're climbing too, that weather's closing in more and more, so we're getting less and less visibility, and we were starting to chat about that a little bit on the radio by this point as well, sort of going, well, our plans to head up to Gibbo, what's it going to be like? It's going to be something like this, isn't it? So yeah, once we got up a little bit in the altitude, sort of over that 1,000 metres, back around 11, 12, 1,300 metres in altitude, here we were. Limited visibility, cloud and fog closing right in as we're working away across the top of this hill. that yellow snowgrass. And yeah, still plenty of evidence on a lot of these trees of the bushfires from a couple of years ago, and a lot of little suckers as regrowth. And with this weather as well, we're finding sort of, well, in this section of track at least, there's more and more of these sort of mini bog holes, certainly wet spots, what have you. So we've just reached the intersection here, which is the Misery Trail on the hard left there, Davies Plain Track on the right, and the Buckwong Track straight ahead, which is the one that we've gone on to. And it's about a 5k run down here to the Buckwong campground and huts area, where we thought we'd stop for some lunch and see if we could find the Buckwong huts if they're still there. So another good solid descent here. And again, if you're paying attention, the scenery is fairly different to what we started off with in the Limestone Creek area. And that's one of the things I enjoy about travelling in the high country, is it's not all just the same bush all the time. It varies with parts of the high country, and it varies with altitude in particular, where you get very different species of plants. Couldn't give you names for any of them. It's not really an area I know much about, but you certainly do notice the change. Nice steady descent here on this section of track. And I'd have to say, even in the conditions that we've experienced today, none of these tracks were particularly difficult. Certainly you want to give them the respect they're due. You want to keep your pace down, manage your speed, try and keep your wheels all on the ground for some good traction. But neither of us felt at any time doing these tracks here that in these conditions it was a little bit sketchy or dangerous. It's a pretty solid, straightforward sort of drive. As I have said, I think that'd be a very different thing if you were to be finding yourself out here and it was pelting down rain. You saw how slippery that wet section of rock was, and imagine if the whole track was like that. So yeah, definitely a few little bog holes along here. We're sort of come down the main ridgeline, off the main ridgeline into a bit of a valley here. We're getting closer to the Buckwong camping area, and also the area where the Buckwong huts are noted. Working our way through the puddles here on this section of track, which, as I said, are somewhat more prevalent than what we've seen earlier. Another good one covering a good portion of the track here. That one did look like it could have been a little bit deeper, and it was. There you go. There's it's obviously the section I was thinking of. A bit of steam coming off the brakes there as the as they go through that puddle. Crazy to see. And again, this is one that I wasn't too sure how deep it might or might not be, so opted to put what I thought was going to be the deepest part of that under the middle of the vehicle and sort of span it to a certain extent, and that paid off and worked fine. Again, if I'd have been solo, I might have jumped out and poked it with a stick just to see what it was like, but you're probably inclined to take more risks when you're with someone else, because you figure, well, if X happens, I've got someone with me that can recover me, they can get help, they can take me out of here. It just feels, you've got that extra layer of support, and it feels like it's, you've got a lot more wiggle room. Again, you can see some ruts forming here, indicating how slippery and soft that section of track can get from time to time. And the access into the camping area is just up here on the right hand side. I don't think I actually captured the turning in. Much as I was running out of GoPro batteries at times, I was also having trouble with the GoPro activation and signing in and signing out of cameras. Of course, it wasn't going to let us get there without at least one more decent bog hole section on the track. So you can see how over time they're probably going to just expand and get bigger and deeper, and really change the experience, most likely. So this is literally just off the side of the track. We've just pulled in and at what we think is the Buckwong campground. And you can see there, we're just taking a drive around it. Really cracking campsite down in here. One of the nicest I've seen. You've got the little stream running along the back of it there, which I'm not sure whether that's Charlie Creek. I don't think it is. I think it could be just a little unnamed tributary of one of the other creeks. But nice open area, very flat, grass sites, well worth checking out. And look at that, the people you run into in these places. That looks like Dan from Out There with Dan. And so it was, of course. So yeah, cracking campsite in here. Not the most easy to access campsite. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but absolutely cracking campsite if you come out to this part of the high country and you're looking for a campsite. By all means, get in there and check it out. There's a little creek that runs around the back of it, and coming over that little bridge, you're straight into another sort of bog hole here. This one did look a bit deeper and certainly a bit bigger, so went into that a little gingerly. And yeah, steep exit as you just saw. And Dan now coming with his grey dingo through that same section. You really didn't have an option other than to drive it, and you can see by the way the front of the car pops up on that exit just how steep that exit was. And yeah, so this is literally just a K or two from that campground, and we found this hut. And exactly like you can see there on the screen, we're wondering to ourselves, is this Buckwong huts, or is this something else?
So we've literally just driven about 500-600 metres from the Buckwong campground through a little bog hole and over that little bridge there, and we have found the Buckwong hut or huts. Only one hut, I think. This does look fairly new, so it feels like it might have been rebuilt after the bushfires. And it may actually even be a private hut because she's well and truly padlocked. Bit of a campground here, a few mud holes developed, so you could camp here, but you'd want to choose your site. But yeah, I'm inclined to think this is some sort of private hut.
It actually is old. You can film this if you want. Life-side orb, so yeah, you can tell by the spangle of the steel or the galvanised coating that it is fairly old, but it's weathered pretty well.
There you go.
Yeah. So
Older than it looks.
this is the precursor to zinc aluminium coatings like colour bonded modern roofing.
Cool.
So there you have it, guys. Great start to today. Before pulling up for a lunch break there, we found what we think is the Buckwong hut. We're not too sure. Like this video if you liked it. Leave some comments down below, and we will see you in the next video. As always, thanks for watching, and get over to our Buy Me a Coffee page to pick up stickers, patches, or just support the channel.